Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Boyos Discuss, the podcast where we pick a topic and then shoot the shit about it for a while. This week we're back after a pretty long hiatus. It's been over a year, year and a half.
I'll brush the cobwebs off. It's fine.
You graduated college and that.
I got deployed. Life happens.
But we're back. We are going to be doing something a little different this week. But before we get into that, I'm Matt, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Ben and other Ben. How are y'all doing?
Doing good. It's nice to be back.
It is.
So today we're going to kick off things with what we're calling the Spring of Swayze. It's something we sort of joked about, I think, for a while at this point. But yeah, we're kicking things off with, basically everyone's heartthrob, Patrick Swayze. We're going to do a movie a week or however many. We'll figure
something.
Yeah, we'll figure that out at a later date.
Now that there's the new Roadhouse, it's like, we have to. You have to look at the classics before you can look at the new, right?
But we're kicking things off today with the 1984, I guess, I don't know if it's a cult classic or would you call it just an outright classic?
I'd say cult classic, because we'll get into it. It didn't make just oodles and boodles of money, but everyone knows about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be doing Red Dawn today. So before we get into the synopsis, what's y'all's sort of background with this movie? Is this one that you saw growing up or...
there's a lot of references to it, I know. In Modern Warfare 2, there's a mission called Wolverines where Russian paratroopers are invading. And, I had a game called, what was it? Toy Soldiers 2. That's, 1980s action figures. And that's just chock full of references I didn't get, but I knew it was from Red Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just heard about it or it's just a whisper in the wind of Red Dawn. You haven't seen that? Oh, Wolverines. And I'm just okay, neat. And, I didn't really watch movies growing up either. But when I worked at a restaurant, I had a bunch of movie buffs around me, and they were like, "What?" And when I say movie buff, it was just action movies from the 80s, and they're like, "What? You haven't seen Red Dawn?" I hadn't seen Predator either, so they were beating me up and throwing these movies down my throat. But we watched Red Dawn, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Now I've seen it, so I've only seen it one other time.
Yeah, for me, I growing up, they reference it on Family Guy. There's Red Dawn the musical, which we I guess may use that later. But and then in Scrubs, they have a point where they are quoting it or something.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, it's just a throwaway line. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I didn't see it until I was in high school, at least. But sort of jumping off that, the reason I saw the original was because they had that remake in 2012 with Chris Evans and Josh Peck, weirdly enough. Did y'all check that one out back in the day, or?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, I had no connection to the original. I hadn't even seen it when it came out, so I was just oh, now they're fighting Korea? I don't care.
I just got brought up to me because it was a fun fact that originally it was going to be China invading, and then they realized, oh no, Chinese people have money. So they very awkwardly tried to retool it to Korea, even though that's way less plausible. I think they had to spend over $1 million to ADR lines and CGI flags from CCP to North Korea.
So I did see the remake. Not good.
Okay.
I considered rewatching it for this, but I was if we're just doing one bullet point worth mentioning for it, I was no.
Did you watch the newer one before the older? Or had you seen the older one and then gone into the new one?
So I don't remember which I watched first. I want to say I did see the original and then watched the remake.
Because obviously I think you'd be disappointed with that for sure.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm curious if it was just blind.
I think also being younger, you forgive a lot more. Just sort of to see the spectacle of it, but then as time passes, you're okay, well, it's not that great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess as some sort of behind the scenes sort of background on the movie, there really wasn't that much on IMDb. Usually they'll have a bunch of trivia with all sorts of behind the scenes stuff and the making of it. I guess one of the more interesting things that I had seen was that initially they had written this as an anti-war movie. But the suits at MGM basically pivoted, sort of during the writing process to make it a teen Rambo instead. since I thought that would be more marketable, which, I mean, all things considered, the movie did decently well.
I mean, what made more money? First Blood, which is a very serious look at what war does to veterans, or Rambo 2
This
First
is the
Blood.
worst integration of or degeneration of a franchise I've ever seen.
But we gotta win Vietnam.
Hell yeah. No, it's kind of weird that you say that, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more at the end too when we've talked about the whole movie, but like, it doesn't seem like they took out one to put in the other. It seems like they just kind of mashed them together. Like, isn't war terrible? And look into the eyes of this young man you're going to have to kill. But also, Wolverines like blow up shit and fucking like montages, and it's like, oh, okay. But anyway.
So, also, I guess more like just facts. The guy who directed this is primarily a writer. He wrote, or I guess co-wrote Apocalypse Now. But most notably, the only other thing he directed that I recognized anyways was Conan the Barbarian.
Ah, the notable anti-war movie, yes.
Is that before or after Red Dawn?
It's after.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is his first, like one of his first directed movies.
I want to say it was the first or like the second, but like I didn't recognize any of the other stuff besides those two. And granted, like the others could be classics that I'm just not aware of, because I feel like a lot of movies from this era, like unless it is something big like Red Dawn, I haven't really heard about, you know. But as far as like the budget goes, it had a budget in 1984 money of about $17 million, adjusted for inflation. That'd be $31 million in 2024 money. And at the box office, it made $38 million in 1984. And adjusted for inflation, that's $69.9 million today. So
not bad.
That's for all the explosions and extras. That's a lean budget.
That is a lean budget, yeah. And I'd say like even just doubling that. I mean, that seems kind of cold classic to me. Like it doesn't seem like it was a big classic at the time if it's just making that much.
One of the other, I guess, few like IMDb trivia things they had was that they did not use any like scale models for anything. So like anytime something blew up, they blew it up.
What? There was an explosion inside of a helicopter.
Yeah.
Apparently they did that.
That's sick.
They really persuaded the Soviet Union to invade a Colorado town.
Incredible. I was wondering what the practicality of that was. That's good.
But with all that out of the way, I'm going to kick things over to Ben for the synopsis.
All right, so the movie opens with a couple of screens of text on a black background to set up this alternative timeline. West Germany, the Green Party comes into power and somehow persuades all of Europe to give up nuclear weapons and for NATO to dissolve. And this leaves America alone, which I guess we were just one election away. The Soviet Union has major wheat failures, so they invade Poland to press food riots. And their allies Cuba and Nicaragua start invading their neighbors. And Mexico is a communist revolution, so you see the Soviets having a much more presence in the world stage, while the Western ones kind of take a step back. And after that, we cut to the man, the legend, your mom and father's first crush, Patrick Swayze, dropping off his brother, played by Charlie Sheen, and their friends in high school. Is Patrick Swayze in high school?
No, so the impression I get is that he's like a year or two older than them, because they're like, yeah, you fucked up at that football game, your last game, or whatever, and he's like, whatever.
He seemed like a high school has-been that kept on talking about like how he could have made states, but he's also the coolest guy in the movie, so that was kind of weird.
I mean, it's like a podunk town, so it's like, you know.
Yeah, I think he was good at at least that flat role he was given, but like, I kind of want to talk about the intro too, of just like that text that Ben narrated, like, you know, like, oh, this is happening in the world.
No, it's like...
It would be so cool to see.
Yeah.
But they're just like, here's text. That's a horrible fucking movie opening.
So me reading it off our script, that is essentially what the movie does.
Yeah, it's just like, why? That's the only worst movie introduction I can think of, is like David Lynch's Dune, where it's just this floating head talking to you about the Dune universe.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what is this? So, I don't know, just text to show you like...
It's so quintessential, like, of its time, like post-apocalyptic or like near, you know, like future movies. Like you had Mad Max, the first one has a similar opening, if I remember right, where they're like...
Well, so does Blade Runner too.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know, those are a good just like like those are sci-fi. So you have to like get into the headspace with it a little bit. But like this is very like this could happen, is like just alternate history. So do something like RoboCop, right? RoboCop doesn't have screens of text telling you what the world's looking like. Like, they have news reports, and it's satirical, and they play it off in, like, a different way. But I don't know, show news reports, show something, like, condensed. I don't know.
Like headlines that say the same information.
Yeah, something. Like, some kind of directorial choice that isn't just text on black. Anyway.
So after Patrick Swayze drops off his friends, we go into a lecture about how the Mongols would surround and kill everything in 100 miles, which I don't think thematically comes back. They just thought that sounded...
I guess the Russians are that, I guess.
It just sounded badass.
Yeah.
But then Russian paratroopers land in a town that has a little over 13,000 people as of 2020, since the town is based and shot in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and then just start shooting teachers and students.
Absolutely.
Like, not even like they're going for guns in their trucks. Like, they're just
right off the bat war crimes.
I don't remember enough about the remake. I feel like that would not fly today. Like, if they were like, okay, 2024, we're doing another Red Dawn remake. Like, I think just with, the whole nature of, like, guns in the United States, I don't think that they would show them shooting up a school.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, there's a few things in this movie that I will talk about as we go that I'm just like I know the 80s were different, but like
pushing it.
Yeah, like you're getting a little weird there, but
well, it's like if you ever see Heathers from 1989, one of the kids pulls out a gun and like pulls the trigger and he's suspended for 2 days because it was just blanks. It was just like, oh, what a wacky innocent time where all we feared was nuclear annihilation.
I kind of like the way they do the paratrooping because it's so just like casual. There's no dramatic music or camera movements. It's just like from a classroom. And then these paratroopers come in and it kind of puts you in the mindset of like, if you just watch this happen, it would seem surreal, and I don't think you'd take it seriously, and you'd just be like, "What the fuck is this?" Yeah. And you'd wander out there and be like, "Huh?" And then only when people were starting to get like shot and stuff would it kind of click. So I did kind of appreciate the way they did that. It's just it's kind of a problem I have with most of the movie is that the camera work is just very like two-dimensional. Like there's not a lot of movement happening between scenes, and just like cameras are just going side to side, kind of just to show everything. But there's no like. I don't know. There's no subtlety or like moving into angles or really. There's just kind of moving from scene to scene with the cameras. But I also liked that when Red Dawn was being introduced with the title, it's like from the clouds. So part of it, I mean, maybe it's just an introduction, but also like that's a Russian gunship coming in to like drop off the paratroopers or something. I don't know. So I like that. But anyway.
So as the town is being occupied by Soviet, Nicaraguan, and Cuban forces, our main character is able to escape in Patrick Swayze's truck and go pick up camping supplies and weapons, but not water, which I wasn't a very good Boy Scout, but that did irk me that they get a shit ton of soda. And then later when they're in the woods, they're like, there's nothing to drink. I was like,
you chotches.
You're going to all die of dehydration. It's going to be a 20-minute movie. But they go up and hide in the mountains and woods. I cannot tell you their names.
Aardvark.
His name was his actual name is Arturo. So it was.
Is it?
Thank you, Wikipedia.
So they really don't do a good job of
not at all.
Like introducing a lot. They introduce a lot of characters very fast, and their parents then show up later. But like sometimes their respective children are not with them. So you're like, who are you? How do you know this guy's dad? Like, what's going on?
I'm gonna say the first act of this movie is rough. Like, just in general, it seems so mispaced and just like, they don't take any time to introduce any single characters. It's just all thrown at you. Here's this group of kids, and now they're all supposed to have their identities and stuff. It's like, no, I mean, there's Patrick Swayze because it's Patrick Swayze. There's Charlie Sheen because it's Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
And then there's the meatbags, the red shirts. Like, it's just, like, I don't know. I really wish they fleshed that stuff out. Yeah. Give us, like, some Seven Samurai or something. I don't know. One by one. Show us these kids, like, oh, shit, he just stumbles into the group, but he's been holding off on his own. Yeah. I don't know. Something.
One thing also, I guess, worth mentioning was that when they wrote the movie, they sort of considered it to be like a Lord of the Flies sort of situation. But I feel like if they leaned into that more, or that was maybe more of the focus, I feel like having this many people could have worked. But just by virtue of what happens later on and it shifting to more of an action movie, it
sounds like that would make the issue of this kind of like the movie kind of already has an identity crisis.
Yeah,
so I feel like that would just be a whole nother thing to like have to confront. But I think it's an interesting. If it's going to be an anti-war movie, lean into that Lord of the Flies. If it's going to be like, hell yeah, 80s action, maybe not.
Yeah.
So as the boys are escaping, a Soviet roadblock stops them, which they explain later how troops get in, but I don't think they can paratrop like an armored personnel carrier.
That's a good point.
But they have it, and then there's one American helicopter gunship that shoots up the Russians, so the boys are able to escape, and they go up in the woods, and they start fighting, they start hunting deer. One of them is like, "That's your first kill, you have to drink blood." And I feel like that's trying to be like symbolic.
So I deadass thought it was going to be like a joke where they're like, "Oh, he drank the blood. Look at this fucking weirdo."
No,
or
they're
whatever.
serious.
Yeah, no, and I was like, "That's creepy."
They're bloodthirsty, literally.
I don't like that.
Because like, it's like we said earlier, if they leaned into the anti-war thing, if it shows that these guys lose their humanity
Yeah,
and they start like becoming bloodthirsty, that would have been like a cool setup. But it's still just like, we're a bunch of kids having adventures fighting the Ruskies.
Well, there's like
all
one
throughout.
kid who is like that, and I imagine we'll get to that later. But like, this whole part was just weird. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, and there's another thing missing is that there's just like zero levity. Like there's not like a character that makes it brighter, or like, oh well, look at the bright side or anything. Everyone's just fucking moody as shit, and they're like, our parents are in concentration camps. We're drinking the blood of deers. And we're gonna kill everybody in our town. It's like, oh fuck.
So eventually the boys, they visit town because they want to get more supplies and figure out what happened. They learn that they're wanted by the local authorities and that Swayze and Sheen's father is in a re-education camp. So they go up and visit the camp, and they're just allowed to walk up to a chain link fence and have a conversation. There's no like guards or anything.
I guess it's like if you were in the city at first, you get put in camp, but after that, it's just martial law. I don't know.
I don't know. They don't do a whole lot of world building with like how functionally this occupation works.
They had this really weird throwaway line too, where they're like, how they figured out who had guns. They're like, yeah, we went to the sports store and found the gun registry or whatever, and that's how the Russians find out.
What kind of libertarian like fever dream threat is that?
It was weird. Like I
must have just gone like.
Luckily,
out
we found
one ear out
Democrats
the
to
other.
help us find the traitors.
Okay.
But they have a conversation with their father, and they learn that their mother is dead. And that was a really weird scene for me because the father has no inflection in his voice when it's like, yeah, our town's been overrun, your mother is dead.
Here's some exposition for you.
And
Yeah,
then
he's terrible.
Swayze and Sheen are overacting. They're just like told to ugly cry.
Yeah.
So I guess when you combine it and average it out, it's normal levels of acting.
Well, and it was just like I watched this with Ben, and it was making us laugh. Like that's not good.
Yeah.
But as they're leaving, their father yells out to avenge him.
Avenge me! And it's like, yeah, he's just blank the whole time, very flat, and then just like screams. Like,
Which
yeah,
also,
not great.
he's not dead yet. He could like liberate him, but no, avenge. So then the boys go see family friends, and they find two girls that are hiding, and they're like, hey, take care of them because they're hiding under the floorboards with us. Oh, by the way, one of your fathers has been executed. It's a very just like, I mean, the guy, breaks down and cries and tries to be emotional, but I have no idea who his father is. So
Do you remember what the old man said when he brought the girls up?
No.
He said, I've got some heirlooms I want you boys to take good care of. Or it's something like that. And he then he opens the fucking
the girls
creepy ass
just scurry
basement.
out.
It was a weird line. Like I get what they were going for. It's just weird.
That is weird.
And the gang, now with two ladies, go back into hiding in the mountain, and they run into three soldiers who are just goofing off. Like, it's three guys having a nice afternoon. They're reading signs and making stuff up because they can't read English.
That's the best bit. Like, that's the closest we get to levity in the movie is when they're reading the sign in English. It's like a...
Theodore Roosevelt led an army to kill 10,000 Indians, and it's just like a regular national park sign.
It's like, we dedicated this to the hard workers who made this park possible or something.
Right. Well, it says like, Teddy Roosevelt established the National Parks Foundation, and here's the acreage. And then the Russians, like, the Russians are depending on one of their soldiers to translate it, and he's saying like, "Oh, this is where ultimate leader Teddy Roosevelt slayed 10,000 Apache and Comanche warriors, and there are arrowheads littered across the scene, and it's the greatest sight of America's battle," or something, you know. And the Russians are like, "Oh, wow."
So after this very goofy scene, they run into the kids, and they're forced to like shoot back in self-defense, and then there's some real emotional whiplash in this scene because two of the soldiers are killed outright, and then one's like grievously injured, and he goes back to his Jeep and is trying to on a radio to get back up. And Patrick Swayze walks up to this bleeding kid, and it zooms into his face, and you can tell he's only like 18, and he's like eyes are screaming, "You don't have to do this."
Yeah,
And then you just hear the gunshot off screen, like with the other children, like, oh, like, I don't know. As an anti-war stuff, I actually have to applaud like the movie. It does a really great job of making this stuff seem just like not sexy at all. Like the way the paratroopers come in and start killing like teachers and stuff is just very like matter of fact, and there's no music behind it. And then like this scene, I'm just like, some of the Russians get wounded and they're trying to crawl back up the hill, and they're like, "Don't kill me," and then they're just like, you know, having to shoot them in different ways or stab them with arrows and stuff, and it's just very like sloppy on both ends. And I appreciate that. Like, that just seems realistic. But yeah, then it has to go into future montages of like, war, sick, hell yeah, like action movies. So.
I thought this thing was going to be like straight up Newsies, where it's just like a kid's fantasy of this is what it's like if there were no parents.
Right. Yeah, it's a conflicting movie because like that stuff's actually really well done.
But then we go into a montage of the kids doing guerrilla ambushes, occupying forces. And they call themselves Wolverines after the high school mascot.
Theme booming in the background.
And it's like, boy, howdy, isn't war actually awesome?
Yeah.
You get to hang out with your friends and two girls your age. Honestly, peak childhood dreams, I guess. But then civilians are executed in reprisals. We get more emotional whiplash scenes. Our heroes bomb. It's a Soviet-American friendship center. So, like, I was watching with Ben. I was like, was that a school? And there's like a bleeding, dying Soviet, and his friend is trying to like cradle him in his arms, telling him it's going to be okay. But then we also see the mayor of the town has become a collaborator, and he's assisting the occupying force. And we do have one of the best lines of the movie, where this Cuban colonel is like, "The boys are part of an elite paramilitary group, Eagle Scouts," which I have known some real mental midgets in Boy Scouts. That is not true.
I love the Cuban colonel. I love him in this
he's
movie.
great. Yeah.
We'll talk about it more later, but he is the only person with an arc in this movie.
That is true. Yep.
Oh, did we there's the part, I think it was probably a little bit before this. One of the kids, he gets like his first kill or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, well, like, how did it feel?" or whatever, and he's like, "I liked it." And it's like, dude, this kid would have been a serial killer, like, if this didn't happen. Like,
I think it's because we just watched, or I had watched Inglourious Bastards. I kept on waiting for the kids to start, like, scalping the bodies.
Yeah. Well, that one kid, he's, like, putting notches in his gun or whatever for, like, all the kills he had. It's like, it's fucked up. But yeah.
Did we miss the scene where, like, they're crying and then Patrick Swayze is like, "You're never gonna cry again. You better not cry," and is like beating up the kids for crying.
Well, no, it's after one of the kids dies, and he's like, "Use it for something else."
Yeah, you're right.
And another thing worth mentioning about the two girls that they mention, and it's like, they don't. I think it's like, you know, it's good that they didn't go into it too much, but it's implied that one of them was assaulted and going to their grandparent or whatever relative, and that's like a sort of through point for her, you know, where they sort of, you know, like, there are comments that are made, you know, sort of early on, and they're like, "You don't want to fucking say that. She will kill you. Like, be careful."
Yeah, I just wish, you know, they gave her like a name or something.
Right? Yeah.
All the characters have names.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
She's Mom from Back to the Future.
Yes. Nice. But after this first montage, there's a downed Air Force pilot played by Powers Booth.
Fuck yeah.
Better known as Psy in Deadwood, and voices Gorilla Grodd in the DC animated universe.
Love him.
And he just fills in lore. Basically, Washington and other major cities were destroyed by tactical nuclear strikes, which that's very hand-waved that nukes were used. Strategic Air Command, they're the people who are in charge of like the nuclear arsenal, was sabotaged by Cuban infiltrators. And then paratroopers were snuck through commercial airlines to take strategic targets, like a town of 13,000 people that has no military, commercial, or infrastructure importance. It just needs to be the headquarters of the entire Soviet invasion.
Well, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt because he talks about like that there's the Soviets were progressing from going over the Bering Strait into Alaska through Canada and then down the Rockies, and like they're going to meet up from north and south positions at the foot of those Rockies. So I'm willing to say that perhaps like this Colorado town is maybe like very adjacent to that, and so it is of strategic importance for like a rendezvous point between those armies.
Yeah.
And then like the Wolverine resistance is delaying that or something, and that's me being
if you had
devil's
to
advocate.
Jump through hoops to write the lore for a movie, I don't think it's doing a great job.
Yeah. I mean, this actually was, I think, my favorite scene in the movie. One of them, at least, where Powers Booth is talking about the state of things, because it's around a campfire at night, and I got that feeling, like that I was getting a scary story, like around a campfire.
Yeah.
And he's talking about like fucking like starvation in Denver, and that the pyres of body, like the flames are licking the sky, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ! Like it was a really good description.
I think hearing exposition from him as opposed to the dad, it's having
a real actor.
Yeah, well, like someone that you just get the feel of based on the character, that it's like, oh, this person has seen things, whereas the other guy's like, yeah, his town got taken over and he got put in.
This is a guy who was mowing his lawn like when the paratroopers hit.
Yeah.
No, Powers Booth is great in this. Like,
yeah, he's really good.
I really felt absorbed in that, and I can only imagine like if I was in a theater, it was dark and it was just that campfire, I think I'd feel like completely absorbed in that. So I like that a lot.
And then to finish up like the world building, mainland Europe is neutral. Britain is fighting the Soviets, but they're about to be overrun because they're kind of small. And then communist China was hit by a preliminary nuclear strike, and now they're fighting the Soviets.
Well, they have there's this line, they're like, yeah, there's 100 million Reds that are willing to fight with us, right? Or whatever, and then there's like, no, now there's like 40 million, and it's like, Jesus Christ. Like,
and he throws stuff into the fire when he says, and the fire like gets like sparked.
Yeah, that was a cool shot.
I know, that was a good one.
Yeah.
I was surprised though that like, according to the nice folks in IMDb, that this was a plausible scenario that the CIA and the U.S. Military War College, which is like for like their senior level education, was this was a plausible thing that the Soviets could do with America's weaknesses at the time. And apparently, I think Ben learned about in school that China and Russia throwing hands wasn't ridiculous at the time.
Yeah, there was a Sino-Soviet split in the 70s where like Mao was very disappointed with how Khrushchev handled the Cuban Missile Crisis. Basically, was like, "You pussy," and broke relations with the Soviets mainly. Started like deindustrializing that the Soviets were helping them do. Like kicked out all the Soviet advisors from the country. And the Soviets were like, "The fuck you doing, bro?" And then he's just like, "I don't know, watch this," and then just started wilding on the borders and like shooting and starting skirmishes. And they're just like, "Mao, what the fuck?" and then that just didn't really get that relationship didn't really get repaired. So, so it's interesting because people might just be like, "Why the fuck like China's communist too?" But,
yeah.
No, I mean like look at Vietnam and China. I don't think they like each other. Look at Cambodia and Vietnam. I don't think they like each other. Like, it's just because they're all communists. Like, I like that element in it, too, where it's like there's more going on and more struggles and fighting in World War III. Like, they keep calling it World War III.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, oh, the USSR invaded. No, I mean, it's like the world now. So that's cool.
No, Infinity War taught us World War III is when Russia's going to invade the East Coast. And then when they get pushed back, say, fuck it, we're going to take all of Europe.
Hell yeah. And it's just because, like, one guy, like, shot up an airline. Yeah.
And they're like, he's an American. Well, let's go.
That works for me. Cowabunga it is.
So then the pilot begins assisting the Wolverines in the guerrilla attacks, and he's giving tactical leadership. So now they can do larger scale operations. So they liberate the re-education camp. They destroy a small airbase. One of the girls, I think, starts seeing him as a father figure because
No.
I want it to be that.
Because she's like, tell me about your wife. And he's like, yep, my wife.
No, and like when he's like, you sort of remind me of her, and it's like, can we not do that?
Yeah.
What? You didn't have to do that. That's like how it's implied that Indiana Jones started dating Marion Ravenwood when he was 25 and she was 16. It's like, you're the writer. You can do whatever you want.
And you wanted to do that. Why?
Because Bruce Timm gets to do whatever he wants.
Did we miss the part where their parents get killed at the camp? And they sing
at the camp.
America the Beautiful, and it's like the most cheesy, like...
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
Like,
it's like I said, I don't understand. Like, I see, like, there's very heavy injections of, like, liberalism and anti-war, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, like, it makes it feel like there's an American identity there beyond just, like, the patriotism. But it's so weird alongside it.
yeah.
No, what you're talking about, you mentioned like that civilians get executed, and that's what happens because like they're responding to the violence from the Wolverines and the killing of their soldiers. But yeah, they mow down a bunch of the civilians. The kids, Patrick Swayze's dad is among them, and one guy like they play the Soviet national anthem, which is a bop.
Yeah.
And the Cubans like fire their 21 gun salute or whatever for the fallen soldiers, and then they're just like right next to that, gonna mow down civilians for it, and they're in just like a dirt field. Or no, it's like sand. I don't even know. Like a quarry.
Yeah.
And they're about to get killed, and then one guy's like, "America for spacious skies," fucking gets blasted. But it's goofy. That stuff's goofy, and it's transparent, and it's disruptive. I don't know. Like, what is the tone going for? Is it anti-war and heavy, or is it like patriotic and like gung ho, like fuck yeah, America? It's trying to be both.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not. It's losing something from both to try to be both. I don't know. There's a dissonance.
So now I guess is a good time to go over there's 3 villains, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So there's Colonel Bea of the Cuban Revolutionary Army, who's the only person with an arc.
Yeah.
Because he was like an ex-revolutionary, and he's really like upset that now he's become like the oppressor that he fought.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's like seeing like we're just policemen now, and
they talk about at one point they're like the I guess Soviet occupation or like fight in Afghanistan, and he's like, oh, how did it go when you were policing Afghanistan? And it's like, well, I mean, hindsight being 2020, like
just
no,
like
that's what's funny.
Rambo 3. We won't make the same mistake. We already had our Vietnam.
You silly Soviets. We would never do something so foolish.
But
that's like, it's so fun watching movies from this time and like the 90s as well, like how they view like the Middle East and like conflict there. Like another one when we were watching all the James Bond movies, like in it's one of the Timothy Dalton ones.
Yeah. The sun, the daylight. Living Daylights?
Yeah, they're helping like freedom fighters in Iran or something, and it's like,
I don't know, I feel like it's the Mujahideen again.
I think
like honestly.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where it's like, man,
Well, it's interesting, like there's such a cultural shift that happened when 9/11 happened. Because like terrorism used to be fun in like Hollywood. No, like they would do like terrorists as like goofy villains and stuff.
Oh yeah, like what's the Arnold Schwarzenegger one?
True Lies. Yeah, right. And they're like fun and like carefree and like, haha, look at the silly terrorist. And then after 9/11, it's like, terrorism's not fun anymore. You do like Olympus Has Fallen and you do like fucking heavy shit.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like skirting that where, I don't know.
But like it ends with him like about to resign his post because he's just so fed up with like having to do all of this. And he's like, well, what's the point of us even winning at this point? The point of communism is to help the people. And then the next villain is Colonel Strelingov
yeah, there you go.
of Spetsnaz. And
he was a bitch in hat.
He
wait, is that the guy who's like incompetent and killing civilians?
No, this is the guy that like he fought in Afghanistan and they bring him in as like a counterinsurgency expert.
Oh yeah, he's
like,
badass.
What if we go on the offensive? And everyone's like, what?
What? Huh?
They were just like taking on the chin for 3 months. And this guy's like, we should probably fight back. He's not a complicated villain, but he is cool looking.
He is cool looking. I do like the framing device they use too of just like time passing. They like frame it by months. So
Yeah.
it started in September,
October.
okay, and it goes till February.
Yeah.
One thing I really do appreciate with pretty much all the Russians, I guess, in a lot of movies of this era, whenever they have Russians, like James Bond, they don't ever speak Russian. They just speak with like very caricature sort of Russian accents. So I really did appreciate that they had that, I guess, sort of level of authenticity where they're like, okay, we are going to have you speak Russian.
And,
And
like,
even like Spanish back and forth. Spanish and Russian you hear a lot.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the two forces.
Yeah.
And then there's General Bratchenko of the Russian army, that he's just a Baron B bad guy.
Yeah.
He's like, yes, we will crush the rebels by killing more civilians.
Yeah, bitch and hat.
He does have, yeah. But that is basically his entire purpose, is to be... So we have the relatable villain, the cool one, and the evil one.
Incompetent, evil Soviet nightmare fuel.
So then the Wolverines are observing the front lines of the war, and there's a tank battle between Soviet and American forces. And the confusion, and also while they're trying to kill the Russian tank crews, the pilot and one of the boys, Aardvark, because I remember they yelled that out. And we were like, who is this?
Yeah.
It's the new guy?
Yeah.
Are killed. The girl we mentioned earlier says she'll never love again, which, because I'm allowed to think whatever I want, means that she's heartbroken over Arturo.
Yeah, she lost her father figure.
And not the man in his 40s. But luckily it's never brought up again.
I wish if I could like alter the script a little bit, because obviously I could do a better job than people in Hollywood.
Better than the guy who wrote
exactly Apocalypse Now. 100%. He's a hack. No, I kind of wish that like Swayze was going through some kind of like crisis where he didn't want to be the leader, and then he was indecisive. Well, they kind of started with that.
Barely. They don't go nearly far.
And then he's just fine with it.
Yeah.
But I wish that like Powers Booth shows up and immediately seizes it and gets it under control, and Swayze can watch him be a leader.
Yeah.
And is like, oh cool, finally, like I don't have to be the leader. And then Powers Booth gets killed. And then it's his responsibility to be that and like inherit that role. But they don't go there. So I think that's kind of a missed opportunity.
Then we go to Soviet troops are approaching in the forest, but they're ambushed by the Wolverines. And the boys are confused how the Russians were able to find them. And they realize that one of the boys, who is the mayor's son and probably has a name, was forced to swallow the tracker.
He was student body president.
Oh, you're right. He's a leader, but not a Patrick Swayze level one.
Not hot enough. Not nearly.
Who could be hotter enough for Patrick Swayze? But he was turned in by the KGB by his father, and then he revealed the hideout under torture. And I don't know, like, they just let him go. I'm confused why he didn't just say, hey guys, like, this happened. But I've also never been tortured by intelligence agencies, so I can't intelligently say how I would react to that. But for his betrayal, he's executed by the group.
Oh, they put a tracker inside of him.
Right, yeah, he's forced to swallow it.
Yeah.
And, like, Patrick Swayze can't shoot him, and then this other guy just walks up and says, I'll do it!
Yeah, the weird, like, serial killer one with the notches on his gun is like, fuck yeah. Like, I'm just like, dude.
They also kill a captured Russian soldier who claims to be protected under the Geneva Convention, but this is ignored. I was interested, so I looked it up, and technically, as irregulars, the Wolverines would fall under Article 5 of the Geneva Convention, that suspension of persons' rights under the convention for the duration of time that is prejudicial to the security of such persons shall nevertheless be treated with humanity, and in case of trial shall not be deprived of rights and regular trial prescribed by the present convention.
The fuck does that mean?
Basically, you have to treat them... You can take away some stuff because they're under arms, but they do not get the same rights as uniformed service members.
The Wolverines.
No, actually, if the the Wolverines.
Okay.
Because if the Wolverines are officially connected to the U.S. government, that is a war crime. You have to be in a recognized uniform to be a combative. Using disguises is only allowed in acts of espionage or sabotage. Otherwise, yeah. So now you know.
I'm also just kind of upset that things just happen to the group and nobody like grows from it and there's no impact afterwards. Like it's like you just had to execute your friend.
Yeah.
All right. Could we have a follow-up conversation about it?
Yeah.
Could maybe the group digest it before we just go into another montage or helicopter fight or something? Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of growth that has potential there to like be explored, and it's just like, no, it happened. What more do you want? We're moving on. And it's just like, okay,
We have to have adventures.
yeah.
So then the remaining Wolverines, they're out in some hills and they start eating some fruit that fell out of a Soviet convoy, and they're attacked by helicopters, which I was surprised was the first time they used air support, because like Afghanistan happened in this universe. They mention it.
Mm-hmm.
And the big reason that like America was able to assist the Mujahideen was they gave them like weapons to counter helicopters, because you can't do that with like AKs and RPGs very easily. But it's the first time the Soviets decide that, hey, a giant floating tank with machine guns could be useful.
Because they have a brilliant tactician that said, let's fight them.
You're right, and it took only 3 months for that to come up. But when they're fighting the helicopters, 2 of them are killed. One of them like shoots a gunner out of the helicopter with an RPG.
Yeah, that shit was sick.
Because I thought it was about to Black Hawk down that goof, but
Yeah, that helicopter was fine.
yeah,
He just got the gunner, apparently.
Yeah.
Blew him apart inside
Yeah.
of the helicopter, but like the helicopter just went, whoa! And you cut that out back there.
And then one of the girls is killed, who we may see later in the podcast.
Oh, for fucking Back to the Future or what?
No, she's in Dirty Dancing. She's
Oh, I don't know. I've never seen Dirty Dancing.
but she does another war crime by booby trapping her body, because they like, look, there's a dead
Just
one.
because she's a girl, it doesn't make it a booby trap, Ben.
But she does kill the soldier, because she has like a grenade under her, and when she's moved, like the pin goes off, and then
Well, yeah, because she's trying to get Patrick Swayze to kill her. She's like, pull the trigger, and he's like, I can't do it. Like, I just can't. And so she's like, well, give me a grenade. Pull the pin. Now go. Like, it's pretty. Like, that's one of the other moments in this movie that I'm like, they just nailed. Like, it's just a very good moment. Yeah.
And it's easy to like, yeah, that's the hero, and they're doing like good. Like they're gonna take a few of them with them. But that was a classic tactic from the Japanese army during World War II, and I don't think we liked that one. It was a sneaky little move, being like, I'm wounded, help! Oh ha! Boom!
you know the real reason that soldier had to die, because he tried to put baby in a corner.
That's true. Nobody puts baby in a corner.
So then Swayze and Sheen agree to attack the main garrison in town so they can provide a distraction for the remaining Wolverines to escape. And this also wraps up all the villains. General Burchenko is just blown up with an RPG.
Yeah. Yes.
It was a blink and you
Full
miss
on.
it. Colonel Stilinkov is killed by Swayze, but not before mortally wounding him, so that Swayze could make a one-liner.
Yeah. Like Swayze snuck up behind him and went like, "What? You lose?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
He
they had,
says,
like-
"You lose." So the guy went, "Oh, there you are," and shoots him. Like
Yeah.
fucking.
That reminds me of, what's the 80s version of that, it's that first movie in the Hannibal Lecter universe?
Uh-huh.
Manhunter.
Manhunter. There's this part where they're like catching the serial killer in that movie, and rather than shooting him through the glass, he screams and jumps through the glass, and it's like, you fucking moron. What are you doing?
It's more dramatic.
While 80s music is blasting
Hell yeah.
because, of course.
Yeah. If you have a window, you have to. It's like Chekhov's window. You have to jump through it.
So then, so Swayze and Sheen are both wounded, and Colonel Bea sees them, but having been disillusioned by war and the Soviet ideology, let the boys go, but they just go and sit down at a children's playground and die.
Mm-hmm. Now that is a good, what's the word? Wrap up. I don't know. It comes full circle, because like when they're talking to their dad in the concentration camp, he's like, "I remember I used to push you boys on the swing in the playground."
Yeah.
And then they die in the playground, and it's like, that's. I saw that, Mr. Director. I forget your name already. I see you.
So then the remaining Wolverines make it to American territory. There's a flash forward to show a monument commemorating their actions with an American flag in the background.
It's partisan rock.
So it's implied America won the war.
Mm-hmm.
And those two lived
But at what cost? It cost us a Swayze and a Sheen.
And
Too
Arturo.
high a price.
Don't forget our Aardvark.
Oh,
It
I
cost,
still don't know who that
it
is.
cost us Psy from Deadwood,
Fuck.
the moral center of that show.
Yeah, but it's illegal for him to live through something. I guess.
So I guess, now that the synopsis is wrapped up, what did y'all think overall of the movie?
It was good. I enjoyed it. I did not know it had those serious things. I thought it was just going to be like Rambo Part 3, where it's just like nonstop action. Hooah, America.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a good movie in here, and it's more good than bad, and I can see why it's a cult classic, but, like, I feel the same way I felt when I watched the first Rambo that you keep mentioning, where it's like, this wasn't a war, this was a war movie, like, this is supposed to be an action war movie? Like, are you sure? It feels like it was trying to explore something deeper, and just because it was in the 80s, it wasn't allowed to. Like, so, I don't know. I liked, even at the end where, like, the colonel, the Cuban colonel, he was like writing a letter to his wife, and he's like, I'm one day from retirement, and I'm going to sail out on my boat, and we're just going to live life. And I'm like, oh, he's toast. But then they like, oh, he's not.
He's fine.
Okay. So there's so many interesting concepts here that you can work with. They do a great job like exploring some of these, I don't know, just like what would a war domestically look like? I think this is still one of the better movies to watch to kind of get a feel for that. But yeah, I don't know. There's just too much kind of holding it back a little bit. And that's just like mostly that dissonance. Some of it's like the directing stuff. I don't know. I'm not surprised that the guy who directed this was a writer first, because there's some really good lines in it and classic like shouts, and people know this movie for like some of the script, but the actual camera work and the way they show the scenery and stuff. I mean, it's just very, there's potential to show like a huge scale. You're in a national park. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I've just been watching too much John Ford, but I don't know. It just seemed a little too flat.
Yeah. So as far as like, I don't know, in 2024, do you feel like it's a movie that's worth watching if you're not like into 80s culture, I guess, sort of?
I mean, it was entertaining, but you don't really need to see the movie to understand the references. Like, most of the references is just Wolverines, teenagers fighting Russians.
Yep. Yeah, I would say no.
Yeah.
Not that it's bad. It's just like you're not really missing anything.
The closest, I guess, analog to like today, that you could be like, okay, well, it's somewhat relevant, and that like, with what's going on right now in like Ukraine, like you have that sort of.
I was thinking about that, the whole time. Really.
So it is interesting that we've sort of, I guess, come full circle in a way to the Russians being the bad guys again. Not to get too political, I guess, but yeah. So I guess in that regard, that is one thing where it's like, okay, maybe it makes sense to do that. But do y'all have any other sort of final thoughts before we wrap things up, or?
No.
No, I think it's a good movie. Don't need to see it.
Yeah, sad that there's no character arcs or introductions or names, really.
Yeah.
And Swayze keeps his shirt on the entire movie.
Yeah, fucking 0 out of 10. Show me nipples, coward.
Literally unwatchable.
So with that, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Boyos Discuss. If you enjoyed the video and you're listening on YouTube, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like it and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back next week to watch, I believe it's Dirty Dancing is the next one, because we're going by year through a couple of the Patrick Swayze movies. But either next week or the following week, we'll get that sorted, I guess. But anyways, guys, until next time.
I'm a Wolverine, and my hatred keeps me warm. A Wolverine, so you Russians best be warned. Shooting commies, drinking deer blood, peeing in the radiator. Look up there, here comes a really angry Russian helicopter. Ah! It has been a Red Dawn.